I find this topic just fascinating and I don't know enough about it. So I want to learn from you. But let's talk first about what is sacred oil. What differentiates them from other oils?
Okay, so there are a couple of aspects of that really that makes what makes an oil sacred. But basically, within the lineage that I am attached to, there's a repertoire of 20 or so oils that have been used for thousands and thousands of years in sacred practice for healing, and in ritual and in also sort of prophecy work as well. Um, but of course, traditions evolve, and we also have some oils from the modern age, which wouldn't have been used way, way back in the temples when my lineage was first began. And what makes a modern oil sacred, and the old ones as well up to a point, is the intention with which they're used by. So we use them, we co-create work with them, and we know that they are a living aspect of the divine. So that again is the connection with the sacred, with the divine, and for the work that we're going to be using them for.
Okay. All right. Well, then also let me ask up front, what is a myra for?
So a myrophore is a woman who bears myrrh, um, and is also sometimes called a mistress of the oils. So, as I was saying, this is a really long ancient tradition, thought to have started in the Egyptian temple times. So, very, very much. Uh, to do with working with the planets, with sacred objects, with sacred sounds, sacred geometry, and these oils as well came into that. Of course, those times oils were used not only for healing, but for mummification as well. And interestingly, as we're talking about beyond the veil, there was certainly a link between using certain oils to help those cross the sacred threshold. So this is a very interesting moment in time because all this work is coming back again to be used now.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I want to dive into that, but I want to ask before we get any further because I think people will have this question: do they have to be oils? Like, for example, I have myrrh powder and frankincense resin that I use to burn as incense, but I've also got frankincense oil. Is there a difference between those?
Yes, there is. It is a difference. And also within our tradition, as I was saying, I'm a mistress of the oils, and it is specifically oils that we're really talking about because the oils are an aspect of the plant that is flowing, and we're working with energy and the flowing nature of energy. So this is really contained within the oil from the plant. Yes, we do work with myrrh, which can also be, in a resin form, a crystallized form. But in our tradition, we'll be working with the pure oil because that has the highest potency and interacts with our own energy body. So there is this direct connection between the oil and the liquid within ourselves.
Okay, I'm glad I asked. Thank you for that. So then, moving forward, how do the sacred oils actually affect and shift our consciousness? What's the mechanism here?
So again, we're going back to energy. Every single oil has its own frequency, its own energy signature. So we have very high frequency oils, such as spikenard and myrrh. And then we have very low frequency oils, such as patchouli. And these oils, when we work with them, will expand our frequencies and either raise them or lower them, but outside the normal spectrum. So this is why these oils help to transform consciousness, because they are affecting the energy that we carry and hold and the light that we hold. So one of the ways that the oils work are by boosting our energy field and enabling us to communicate using the language of light. And this is where working beyond the veil, which is a large part of the work that I'm trained to do and do offer, is partly that the language of light is this universal form of communication, really purely energy based, and it enables us to talk with those beyond the veil while we are still this side of the threshold.
Okay, all right. You mentioned spikenard. I believe it's also called jatamansi. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. That would be its botanical name. But within, again, my tradition, which is linked back to the Mary Magdalene tradition, spikenard is probably the most famous of all the sacred oils. It's the one that she is said to have used with anointing Jeshua at the Last Supper before the crucifixion. And she will have used that as part of her sacred practice to prepare him for what was coming the next day, for transition. And the spikenard will work on the energy field of the person who is at end of life to enable them to effortlessly step out of their physical body and cross the sacred threshold. So this was such a perfect sacred oil to be working with prior to death, prior to the crucifixion. And we still use that oil with people who are at end of life to make sure that they have an easy crossing, that they are able to just release worries, tensions, fears, and go across the threshold. And then there's an even more extraordinary aspect to using spikenard in end of life care, because when we use it again with intention, it has an ability to enable those at the bedside who are vigiling the dying person to also absorb some of the energy of the transition, the ecstatic energy that happens as we release from our physical body. It enables those at the bedside to feel that as well. And in feeling that, it is said to give them a glimpse of paradise, and that enables them to lessen their fear of death and to know that they have not lost their connection with their loved one who is at end of life. So there's a lot bound up with this particular oil, spikenard, and it is such a beautiful oil to work with.
Mhm. Yeah, it sounds like what you're talking about is what William Peters calls a shared death experience, where you're generally at the bedside of a loved one, but it can happen elsewhere, and you sort of go along for the ride a little bit across the veil, and then you end up coming back. So you're saying that the scent of spikenard can actually help that to happen. Am I understanding correctly?
Yes, it's not exactly the scent of it. It is just
Mhm.
the frequency of it. So again, that's important to explain how we use these oils, because if I explain that, you'll see how we pass on the frequency of the oil, which will then affect the frequency of the person we're working with. So in this tradition, we don't massage with oils. We don't burn them in burners. But what we do is we prepare to use the sacred oil by clearing ourselves and by going into meditation and asking that we become pure, empty vessels, to then enable the frequency of the oil to come in through us and out through our hands. So I would rub a few drops on my hands, make a a short affirmation or prayer or blessing of intention. And then with the drops of oil on my hands, I will then hold the hand of the person who is in transition, or hold their feet perhaps, which is again the old-fashioned way called anointing. And I may also hold the hands of the people around the bed, the family, and that will be transmitting the frequency of the oil to them. So that's how it works. So yes, these shared death experiences, as they're now called, to give them a modern name, is nothing new to me and to us doing this work, because this is how we have always been able to comfort those who are not only dying, but also those who are preparing to lose someone they love. And that's a very sacred aspect of my work as a soul midwife. So this oil is a wonderful tool for me to be using in that work.
Is it something that somebody who's not preparing for death or doesn't fortunately have a loved one on their deathbed, can it be used just in my own personal journeys across the veil?
Yes, it certainly can. So it has within its frequency, which is kind of like a radar setting. If you work with it yourself, again, I would suggest a couple of drops on your hands before you go into meditation. And then don't forget to set your intention. So whatever that might be, but spikenard has this real affinity with helping us to straddle two worlds, to have one step on this side of the threshold and another step on the other side. So your intention may be, for instance, to reconnect with a loved one who has crossed over, and you would put a little bit on your hands. You would set the intention of being able to connect with them. And then 2 extra little tips here. If you want to see something that you feel has been hidden from plain sight, you want to see the truth of something, maybe this is hypothetical, but maybe your loved one had a death. There was an aspect that puzzled you slightly. You weren't quite sure of a detail. If you want to see with clarity what actually happened, you would put a little bit of that spikenard on the third eye. And that would help you tune in to retrieve that knowledge and that connection. Or if you wanted to understand why something happened, again, something you haven't really understood at heart level, then you would put a little bit of the spikenard and literally rub it on the heart chakra. And the sacred oils are master teachers. They are master teachers of divine consciousness. So one of the key things that we can do when we work with a sacred oil is to ask questions. And they are brilliant at replying. And you will hear what they're saying. This again goes back to using the language of light. So if you ask your question, and typically there are 2 questions good to ask them. What do I need to release? And what is your gift? What are you going to share with me? And you just sit in quiet meditation for a while, maybe 5, maybe 10 minutes. And then you will nearly always receive an answer. It may come as a symbol, it may come as a picture, you may have a random thought that seems a bit strange at the time, but jot it down, think about it. A dream may follow, which will then confirm or set everything into place. So it's the beginning of a journey when we work with a sacred oil to help us look and extend beyond the veil.
Thanks for listening. Check out Castle Gate, a novel based on my own ancestral healing journey at lisabonis.com. In 1921, 4 men set off from Scotland to the United States. Will Garrock, his brother Pete, his son Willie, and his nephew Thomas, all coal miners. They left behind the miners' rows and the nationwide mining strike with its soup kitchens. Their destination was Castlegate, Utah, where they had kin to welcome them before sending for their wives and children. They prospered in America, working in one of the finest mines in Utah. Until that tragic day, March 8th, 1924. Disaster struck. 3 explosions, trapping 171 men inside. Rescue crews worked tirelessly for days, but sadly, they could not save a soul. Women were widowed and children were orphaned, and some never recovered from their broken hearts. Castlegate is the true and tragic saga of a Scottish family whose dreams of finding their fortunes in the bountiful coal mines of Castlegate, Utah during the Prohibition era explode in one of the most devastating mine disasters in American history. Learn more at lisabunnies.com.